I was thinking about the theme that you guys have for this, economic development. I'm like, how the heck are they going to try to square this circle with economic development and my napkins? I mean, and I don't want you thinking I waste good government money on drawing napkins every day. I truly have a day job, and there's a lot of things I have to do, a lot of people that I have to see and places to be every single day. And at this level, what I do now for the Army, I've commanded 3 installations, 3 posts in 3 states, South Carolina, New York, and now out in Kansas. But in Kansas, it's a little bit different because it's not only the installation that I command, it's 12 others across the country. And you hear about the Pentagon in the news, and people always talk about the Pentagon says. So if you ever hear that on the news, it's like, okay, Pentagon don't talk, right? It's got 5 sides, but it don't talk. Pentagon has never said anything, and I've been in there many a time. The Pentagon said, the Pentagon just don't talk, right? A lot of leaders inside the Pentagon talk, and that's where a lot of the plans are made. Things that are done across all of our services are done for our nation, but a lot of the thinking for the Army happens at Fort Leavenworth. It's considered the intellectual capital of our Army. All of our senior leaders, all 7, 8 of our 4-star generals come out to Fort Leavenworth 7 times a year. So, I mean, and they're all my bosses, right? I'm probably the most confused 3-star in the Army because I've got multiple bosses, and you got to answer to all of them. And there's 3 kinds of help. Help you don't want, help you don't need, help you don't ask for. I get all 3. Right? Because imagine, that's like your CEO coming to see you like 7 times a year. You're like, you just left yesterday, now you're back. You know, so you get all of them that come in there, but it's based on what we do. And one of the key things that we do, and somebody asked me about the disciplinary barracks. So we have the disciplinary barracks out at Leavenworth. All of our field grades, our majors, like Major Harris and Major Hurley, come through Leavenworth for their tactical operational training. And you think back to General Eisenhower, General Powell, et cetera, myself, I mean, you all go through Leavenworth at some point in time in your career. And then your next schooling that you get is in the War College at Carlisle, Pennsylvania. But we do leader development. That is what we do. From day one to now, I mean, as a 20-year-old leaving South Carolina, my first platoon, 30 people, you're in charge, and somebody walks away. Your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your doctor, lawyer, you name it. You're that for those 30 plus people. And then now having 80,000 people at different organizations, installations across the country, you're responsible for everything they do. That is the first thing about leadership they tell you. You're responsible for everything that organization does or fails to do. Whether you're there, you can see them, touch them, doesn't really matter. You're responsible for everything they do or fail to do. That's what you're charged with. And I've been charged with that my entire career, all 33 years. The thing that brought me here with the napkins, I'm amazed. James, thanks for following my social media, or socials as the young kids talk about them, because you never know how things will go. And the napkins actually took off. And I'll give you a little bit of a story about that, but just very quickly about me, because you want to meet people where they are, and then I want you to meet me where I am. And I'm a dad, I'm a father, I'm the father of a soldier. My oldest son is a captain in the Army, also graduated from South Carolina State. My youngest son also graduated from South Carolina State, and my wife is from South Carolina as well, so total South Carolina family. And they've been on that journey with me my entire time, in the Army. 2 granddaughters, lovely granddaughters. Most people think with a name like Beagle, we have a Beagle as a pet. I have a Chihuahua. I proudly walk my Chihuahua around the neighborhood, and people would pick at me and they pick at the Chihuahua, but when my Chihuahua bit a German Shepherd, they stopped picking at both of us. She's like, okay, all right. It's like very small, but a lot of attitude. And so we have no problems. And just absolutely love what I do for our nation. And speaking of our nation, I mean, we consider what we wear the cloth of our nation, and most that have not seen, these are not new uniforms to us anymore, but this is a uniform of our greatest generation. The Army went back to this uniform because it represents World War II. The greatest generation is why we do this. It's exactly the uniform they wore back then. So very proud, very proud. I get chills just thinking about wearing that uniform that generation wore when you think through it. But by show of hands, any veterans in the room? Thank you very much. But I thank you for your service as well as your sacrifice. The 2 go hand in hand. And if you had a spouse with you on that journey, thank your spouses as well for the sacrifices that they've made. When it comes to our spouses, our children, the one consistency that they have is inconsistency. They move a lot, we deploy a lot, we go places. My 2 kids, my 2 boys, the oldest, went to 10 schools in 12 years. My youngest went to 11 schools in 12 years. So the number one consistency they have in their life is inconsistency, right? That's the sacrifices that they make. So back to the napkins. So that's a little bit about me. Back to the napkins. Go to the next slide, please. So we have this thing in the Army with PowerPoint. We gotta use PowerPoint. Once we retire, we have to go to PowerPoint Anonymous. We have to like work ourselves out of using PowerPoint. So we always use it, but it's not to bore you with slides or anything else. My goal is to be not only a good guest, but a good speaker. Sometimes you can be a good speaker, but not a good guest. You can be a good guest and not a good speaker. Hopefully my goal is to be both. It reminds me of a speaking engagement I had here in South Carolina at a church once, and after the service was done, a little boy walks up to me and he hands me $1. And I'm like, why are you giving me this $1? I said, you must have missed collection. He said, no, it's for you. The $1 is for you. I said, why are you giving it to me? He said, as you were talking, my dad looks over at me and said, that is the poorest speaker I've ever seen in my life. So I want to make sure you get some of my allowance money so you don't have to be so poor. So I don't want to collect money after this. If you have it, give it to James, give it to Carl, give it to somebody, but don't give it to me. But what got me here, there's always a point. Somebody's going to inspire you at some point in your life, in your career, whatever you do. As a high school student leaving here, graduated Woodruff High School, I don't even think my good friend Phil on this picture, who's in the room, Phil, raise your hand, knows this story. But I went into the high school counselor. I was good in sports. I played 3 sports on championship teams. My grades weren't bad by any means. And I said, I want to go to college. And she looks at me square in the face and said, I don't think you're college material. Oh. So it's kind of like the speaker yesterday. That does something to certain people. That will spark something in you. Some people will turn it off, right? They said, oh, you essentially said what I'm not capable of. And sometimes that hurts when a person tells you that. I didn't take that personally, but I did take it in such a way that, well, I will prove you wrong. Because that is somebody putting a ceiling over your head, saying what you can't do. Your goal at that point is to break that ceiling. 9 out of 10 is going to be glass, paper, whatever the case may be, but you break that ceiling that somebody put above your head, right? Me and that counselor are very good friends to this day. She texts me, she never knows she ever said those words, never. And I've seen her, talked to her, called her. When I go home to my high school, talk to her as well. My wife said, you should say something, you should tell her. No, why not? She motivated me. You can be motivated in a lot of different ways. This guy, we have known each other since the 3rd grade. And as I was sitting in math class, in our 3rd grade class, Miss Casey's class, and like be failing math miserably, I look over at Phil and he's like sketching on paper. And Phil would make just straight A's. I'm looking at him and I'm like, what are you doing? And he could draw the best USC Gamecock symbol in the 3rd grade, like ever. I mean, it looks better than what's on the helmet. It was like awesome. And sometimes he'd give it to me and I'd like sketch it or trace it, do whatever I would do, and just kind of kept those skills. He still does it now. He's got his sketch pad out like right now. He is what I call an artist. I am a copyist, right? I'm not an artist, I'm a copyist. I'm very good at copying stuff. If I see it, I can draw it. And Phil has done a lot of different things in his career, currently teaches up at USC Upstate. And he came to me once, based on what he was doing in his profession, and said, I do this thing called beer and a napkins. Phil is also a beer connoisseur. And every time I see him on his socials, he's got a beer in his hand or something. He's out with a beer and he does things on napkins, but it's about thinking. It's really about thinking. And in terms of what I do day in and day out, in terms of leadership, leader development, you're always trying to communicate it. You're always trying to make it clear to others the logic of what does it really mean to be a leader? What does it really mean when you talk leadership? We talk being a manager, being a supervisor. In the Army, you're a leader, period. I look at all of you as leaders. You can have a title that says manager, but you manage systems and products. You lead people. You lead people. You don't manage people. You don't supervise people. We lead them because it's a human dynamic. And there's a lot of variables with that. When you break that down, what does that mean? I got to know that person. I got to know that team. I got to get that team to work and operate in a certain way. So I said, how else can I communicate this? We have doctrine, we have courses, we have schools. We do it day in and day out. But you can never communicate enough. And I've done it many different ways. I said, oh, I'll just take Phil's beer and a napkin idea, go leadership in a napkin. My goal was to do it once and be done. Just put thoughts down. If you can clearly think through something, Albert Einstein said it. If you can explain something simply, then you understand it. I read it in a book called Brief. If you can explain something in 8 to 10 words, then you understand it very well. If you can draw it, you understand it. Or you're working your way to understanding something very well. And leadership is very hard for most to understand if you're not doing it, if you're not deeply thinking about it every single day. So the ideas that I got for this, my inspiration actually came from my 3rd grade classmate. And our other buddies you see up there, a 30-year reunion, we've known each other since kindergarten or 3rd grade. And I was very fortunate. Unlike my sons, K through 12, same kids, same friends, same teammates the whole time. My kids growing up as military-connected kids, a little bit different. Next slide, please. So here's how we'll start. In the Army, we talk about be, know, do. 3 things. Be and know comprise the attributes that we want in all of our soldiers: intelligence, character, presence. Those are things that we want you to emulate. That's what a soldier is. That's what it means to us. And when it comes to the do part, as a leader, that's what we want you to do. But I think that is very similar in any business, any organization. That's what you want your leaders to do in that organization: lead, achieve, and develop. Those 3 things. My napkins are a little bit out of order. I've done about 13 now. When I did the first one, I got so much on social media. It's like, when's the next one? What are you going to do next? What are you going to draw next? Hey, I got a recommendation. You're like, okay, I don't have time for this. I mean, I do PT. I come in, I have a good idea, epiphany. I put it on a napkin, put it in my drawer, and then I go do my daily work, right? But I get that, and I'm like, okay, so there's something to this. I said, okay, I'll just do one a month. So on the first of every month, I'll do a napkin, and it's just based on whatever hits me, just kind of whatever is out there, whatever I feel, whatever I sense, maybe what I've dealt with during the week. And so these are not necessarily in order, but I'll just give you some of the background in terms of themes. But the whole B one, it talks about, really what does a person really want to do when you're leading in any capacity? Be kind, be humble, be thankful, be thoughtful. That was really the point of it. You have to be those things as a leader. You have to be mindful of yourself, understand yourself, and are you doing those things on a daily basis? Kind, thoughtful, humble, thankful. I am very thankful for where I am right now. Very thoughtful about what I get to do and who I get to interact with. I'm responsible for our nation's most precious resource. Anybody that leads in our Army or any of our military services, that's what we're responsible for, our nation's most precious resource, which are sons and daughters. Better be pretty humble about that. Better be pretty thoughtful about that. Better be pretty thankful about that. So just reminding leaders in our own force, if you're a leader, just be, right? We talk about be, know, do. That's a doctrinal thing for us, but think about the other side of it. The clock represents time. And we always talk about, I had a good conversation this morning with Melvin, and I use this in every group I talk to in terms of the Army. When you talk to people daily and you ask them, hey, how are you doing today, Brian? How are you doing today, Steve? I'm looking around the room. Hey, I'm busy. Man, I'm busy. I didn't ask you what you were doing. I asked you how you were doing. I don't honestly care how you're doing. I'm only interested in what you're doing, right? But everybody's busy. Go talk to the people at the front counter. They're busy today. This is the busiest day ever. It's like, okay, right? I really want to know how you're doing. But there's a big difference between being productive and being active. Look up the definition of busy in Webster. All it says is having a lot to do. We all got a lot to do. Or you getting a lot done. There's a big difference between the two. And when it comes down to leadership, you got to think about what you're for. Simon Sinek talks about start with why. All good. I love that. But as a leader, you got to understand, what are you for? Because most of us, if you're a busy person, you're going to have a to-do list, right? By show of hands, who's got that to-do list somewhere? That's everything everybody else wants you to do, not you, right? Now, when it comes to the honey to-do list, I'm like, that's like mine. You just get it done. No questions asked, you just get it done. But that to-do list, that's what everybody else is like wanting you to do. And you'll get those things and it keeps you just busy, just occupied. My list is now called a for list. What am I for? I have a for list. What I'm for, here's what I need to do. And then I can manage my time better. A lack of time is a lack of priorities. And then you can prioritize. Some things don't need to be prioritized. But if I'm busy, you're going to prioritize everything. And oh, by the way, try to do it all. You ever had one of those days you come home from work, it's like, man, I got a lot done today. We did a lot of stuff. What'd you do? What'd you get done? I don't know, but we did a lot of stuff today. We just did everything. Okay, all right. Because you're going to do that every single day, right? But what things are you actually achieving? So that was really the point with the clock. Lack of time is a lack of priorities. And you better know what you're for, and you better prioritize against it, or you're just going to waste a lot of time over the course of whatever you're doing. And how much are you really achieving at the end of the day? Next slide. Lead piece. And I can go back, I'm not going to talk through every bullet that I've got up there, but it's just points for you to reference. The key thing on the last slide, it talked about influence. Any leadership definition that you look up, 8 out of 10 definitions, they're going to have the word influence in it. And you think about what I do in terms of leveraging social media, other things that are out there, your physical influence, your influence in the information space, it's a way to do it. It's a way to expand that sphere of influence, is essentially what you're doing. But most leadership definitions, like the Army's definition, influencing others to accomplish a mission by providing purpose, direction, and motivation. It's those 3 components for us. Most days, your boss, your manager, whatever you want to call it, will go in, they can provide you purpose. Here's why we got to do this. They can provide you direction. Motivation, maybe, maybe not. You have to do all three. You can't motivate others if you're not motivated yourself. How do I tap into your intrinsic motivation versus I just got to keep pushing you? Come on, we can get this done. I ain't got time to be a cheerleader. Sometimes being a leader means you're a little bit of a cheerleader, but not all the time, right? At some point, I've got to tap into what drives you intrinsically, internally, to get things done for the team, right? The lead. And so we're just going to walk through lead, achieve, develop. But these things are intangibles. So I got on a point where, how do you explain some of the intangibles of leadership? We have definitions for them in the Army. We have doctrine, tons of it. We have a doctrine called leader development, developing leaders. We have all of that. But still, you can never talk about it enough because sometimes you miss the intangibles, the communicating piece. What I've pointed out here for the team is like a lot of times, are you communicating or are you talking? And most of you know what I mean when I say that. Are you communicating or are you talking? It's different when you're just talking. I can talk over you. You can hijack my conversation. And many of you have seen those people. They'll one-up you. Hey, I went to the mall yesterday and bought me a new pair of shoes. You know what? I went to the mall last week and I bought like 2 pairs of those shoes. You just one-up me. You weren't even listening to what I just said. You were just waiting to just go over the top. Or are you going to hijack my conversation, right? And there's this thing called the elusive 600. Anybody ever heard of that? We can speak at roughly 150 words a minute. I'm from the upstate, so I get about 145, 135 on a good day. But on average, an average human can speak 150 words a minute. Our brains can process 750. And so you ever had that conversation where somebody just takes the rest of it? It's like, hey, I was going to, oh yeah, and you went over to, I didn't finish yet. Because your brain can process much faster than I can speak. And so we'll just cut in. We'll take somebody's conversation from them. They call that the elusive 600. So you got 600 words that you just need to hold on. Just hold on for a second. Just hold it, right? How do you corral that? Because you're just itching to like come back and say something. I learned not to do that with my spouse. I just like lasso that 600, just like shut it up, zip it. But we can't control that 600. It's like that elusive 600 is like, it's just processing and I'm just waiting for you, okay. And into your mind and your mouth is like slow motion right now. And your brain is like ready to go. But you got to control that if I'm really going to engage in a conversation to hear what you said to me. So are you hitting the mark or are you not hitting the mark? Because if you're just talking and you're not listening, you're not hearing. And the feedback. I love the saying, feedback is a gift. I really don't love that saying because I look at feedback as the breakfast of champions. That's how you get better. You look at any elite athlete, anybody that does things well at a very high level, CEOs, they have coaches. They have people that get paid to coach CEOs. But it's that feedback that makes them better. When you think about gift, the gift of feedback, it's like any gift you get. You get that ugly tie for Father's Day, and like, what do you do with it? You're like, I'll hide it in a drawer somewhere and say I lost it, or I can't find it. It was a gift, but I don't want to use that gift as an example. But the feedback, that's the breakfast of champions. That's going to make you better. But can I listen, hear, understand, internalize that feedback that I'm getting? That's what's going to make me better. And then the last one, we use the term in the Army for a long time called toxic, being a toxic leader. And we'd evaluate it, people would get assessed on it, peer evaluations, subordinate evaluations, but it wasn't really well defined. If I came in one day, yelled at you a little bit, but again, I'm not being disrespectful, I'm not trying to dehumanize you or anything else, voice may get a little bit loud, oh, you're toxic. Okay, we need to put a little bit more refinement on this definition, so now we refer to it as counterproductive. And you can be hard, but you also have to be fair. You definitely have to be humble. You have to be kind in terms of who you're dealing with because it's a person on the other end. And how do you control that and how do you control your own emotions? So we use it, you're either counterproductive or you're productive. And counterproductive means a lot of bad things in terms of you can't control your own ego. There's a lot of hubris in terms of what you do. But as a leader, you have to be mindful of those things. And that was a point of reminder, I call it to the force, or people that leverage the napkins when they see them. Next slide. And then achieve. You want to get things done. And I came up with the boats one day because I was, feeling sorry for myself after PT or something like that. It doesn't matter what size of the boat it is. If you're a leader of that organization, you're the rudder. It could be a little boat, it could be a big boat. Don't really matter. But you're going to have to steer that boat to get somewhere. And all that is on you, right? All that responsibility is on you. So it doesn't matter the size of the boat. You're the rudder, and you're going to get them there. You're going to get that whole team there through storms, you name it. And people will look at you when bad things happen. What is the leader going to do? What is it you do? Because that's what everybody wants to see. And with teams, you look at the one, number 7, many hands, many minds, one goal. How do you get everybody on the same sheet of music, different people, different personalities, different perspectives, different opinions? How do you get everybody on that same sheet of music to achieve that one goal for the organization? That is very hard to do. But you have to do that and figure out how to do that as a leader. And sometimes we forget those points. You have to achieve anything that we do. It's not an expectation that we're ready. We will always be ready for the American public that we serve. You never have to worry about that. You never have to guess. So that is us achieving every single day, wherever we're called, any service. But it's the same in business, same everywhere else. Somebody wants you to achieve something. What is that goal? What is that mark? What is that price point? Whatever the case may be. How do you get everybody behind that to achieve that and row it in the same direction? I use an analogy with my team out at Leavenworth, that's physically at Leavenworth, auditorium about triple this size, bring them all in. And I said, look, we're all in the same boat. I said, but the problem with that, in some cases, I've inherited organizations where you have more holes in the boat than you have boat. And why is that? Because you want everybody with an oar in their hand rowing in a certain direction. But you will have some in that organization in the back of the boat with a drill in their hand. And they're just drilling. You're like, what are you doing back there? Nothing, I'm good. And they're just drilling holes in the boat, right? They're just kind of slowing the organization down because you're drilling. So I said, we have to go around and find drills. If you got a paddle, good. You got a drill, bad. Still want you on the boat. I still love you to death, but give me that drill, right? Because you're putting holes in our boat. We're not going to achieve the missions that we have to achieve. And so everybody was walking around Fort Leavenworth going, I'm looking for drills, sir. I'm looking for drills. Absolutely. Find them. Find the drill because somebody's in the bag putting holes in our boat. We have no time to take water, right? Everybody's got to row and row in the same direction. But it is about getting results, getting things done at the end of the day. But then how do you do that with an entire team? A team this size, multiple teams, distributed teams, getting everybody on the same sheet of music. That takes a lot on that leader to think their way through. And I know all of you, based on what you do and what I've known and what I've got to know about many of you over the last few hours between yesterday and today, you know a lot of these things. But it does. Even at my level, you never stop practicing. You never stop trying to get better and refining your leadership. And how do you lead? I mean, now with the generations that we have coming in the Army, I have to meet them where they are. At this level, yesterday, I was at Dorman High School, bunch of high schoolers. Still, not trying to recruit all of them, but just to communicate and connect with them. You've got to adjust your own style. You got to adjust where you are. It's like, hey, I don't need you to come up and meet me. I got to come meet you first, and then see if I can get you to go along on the journey. The next one. And I'll conclude with this. No, I've got one more. This piece in terms of developing others, how do you do that? It's always a hard thing to develop others because you really got to figure out and calibrate where people are and where they're at and where they want to go, and then your role inside that. But again, it goes back to many intangibles that you have to figure out, things that you have to build. Trust is one of them. And we talk all the time. Our foundational thing in the Army, all of our services, really, we use it in different ways, is trust. You got to have that trust bond and you got to establish it. But there's sharks in the water when it comes to trust. A lot of things that will break that trust. Harmful behaviors, just how you act, how you operate every single day, you break that trust. So everything that you've been trying to work for and build and achieve, it's not really going to be there. And to each individual, we do individual counselings better than I think any organization out there. I mean, we have doctrine for that as well. We have doctrine for everything. This is how you counsel a person. This is how you coach. This is how you mentor. We have all those handrails, and it's still never enough in order to make sure we get it right day in and day out. The impact that you make. I love this one because as I interact with different people, you can watch and see how people operate. And it's very good to have a good high IQ. I had a boss once tell me, I said, boss, which would you rather have? Somebody with high IQ or high EQ? He said, EQ all day. And he was a 4-star. And I'm like, I kind of agree with that. EQ, you've got to be able to read and understand people, but then watch what people do. I read this great book once, and it talked about there's 4 types of people: the undertaker, the caretaker, the playmaker, and the game changer. And some of you have seen these personalities. The undertaker is somebody that comes in every day with the black cloud over their head. I don't care how good life is, they'll come in. How was your night last night? Oh, well, my back hurts, and I did this, and had this happen, whatever. I mean, it's like, okay, you are vertical, right? You're breathing right now. You did wake up this morning, but just nothing is ever good. How's the coffee? Well, I didn't like it. It wasn't like the one I got from here, there. It's just always a complaint. It's always something. That is an undertaker. They want to pull everybody down 6 feet or below with them, no matter what. That's your undertaker, right? Typically, you don't like being around undertakers because there's nothing ever good enough. And then there's a caretaker. The caretaker is only going to do just enough to get by. No more, no less. I come in this time, I check out this time, you're not getting any more juice out of this rock. It's just not going to happen, right? They just caretake is what they do. The ESPN symbol represents the playmaker. It's like ESPN, top 10. I'll do something great once, and I'm just going to ride the rest of my career on that one thing, right? 2 years ago, you remember I did X, right? It was like awesome. Yeah, what did you do yesterday? Matter of fact, what did you do 2 months ago? Like nothing. But yeah, 2 years ago, you remember I did that one big thing. Like, okay. They make ESPN one time, and they're good. They're done, right? Playmaker. They just want to make ESPN one time. And then you have the game changer. Regardless of where you go, regardless of what the situation is, regardless of what you do, you're going to change everybody in that organization. You're going to change everybody in that room. You're going to change everybody you meet. It's like putting a coffee bean in water. That is going to change the color of that water every single time. You're a game changer. You elevate everybody. You're the tide coming in, and everybody's going to elevate wherever you go. And I've been in some pretty tough situations where I walked in, and okay, that's where that sticks connects to me. And I'll give you a story. As a young battalion commander, a battalion is roughly about 1,400 people in a battalion, but a battalion, you're always around a battalion. A battalion is, you put 1,400 in a room, and you're seeing with that battalion, you train with them, you're interacting with everybody, that whole 1,400, day in and day out. Go to the field, you deploy, interacting throughout the day. So at a battalion level, you get to really see those 1,400 people every single day. And that is a point of pride if you can make it to battalion command level as a lieutenant colonel. That is a rank you'll have as a battalion commander. So think of it in terms of if you go in as a CEO, and I know you guys have, or think in terms of you have a COO, a CFO, you've got your little team and you got a staff. You go in, you've got that as a CEO, you're pretty good. For us, you go in, you have a senior enlisted advisor, we call the sergeant major. You'll have your operations officer, you'll have your executive officer, you'll have your intel person, you'll have your personnel person, and we even have chaplains. So at battalion level and up, you get your own preacher, right? Because you got 1,400 people, that's a big congregation, so you get your own chaplain. So I make it to the point of battalion command, and you're like, okay, now you feel pretty good about yourself. You're about battalion command level, you're roughly about 20 years in, 21 years in, and I tell leaders that come to Leavenworth, because every battalion brigade commander that will command a formation in our Army, they come out to Fort Leavenworth, every single one. It is that important. And I'll tell them, I said, there's 2 leadership poses when you're in charge of formations that big. One is like, those are my people, I'm in charge, right? All my people. Those are my people, I'm in charge, right? I said, don't get too big for yourself. Because my story, I walked in, battalion command, I had that same perspective. I'm in charge of all these people, this is awesome. Kind of know what to do. The first 8 months of my command, I did not have 5 of my top 5 at the same time or any given time. They were all in the process of getting relieved or fired. So imagine going as a CEO, your CFO got fired, your COO is getting relieved, and everything else. You got all these problems. The one person out of those 5 that I literally, no kidding, fired was the chaplain, like the preacher. And a soldier walked up to me and he's like, we were talking, I said, you got any questions? He's like, yeah, sir, I got a question. He said, is it true that you really fired the chaplain? I said, yeah, I fired him. I said, he deserved it, right? And then he took one step left away because he thought lightning was going to strike me. He was like, you don't fire a chaplain. It's like, you must be like some kind of bad dude. And typically, you don't see people get relieved, due to commitment, due to competence. They're going to have those things. Typically, it's going to be something along the lines of character. And I had one of those 5 was very counterproductive. And I'm like, you can't be in my organization and be in the top part of my team and you operate that way, because I don't operate that way. And we call it self-selecting. So at some point, you're going to self-select out and do something stupid, and then you're out of the organization. But I didn't have that for 8 months. And so now you're going 2, 3 levels deep in your organization to have somebody fleet up in that position. You're like, okay, we can still make this work. We still have to achieve. We still have a mission. We still have to do what we need to do. And I didn't go wringing my hands to the boss. There's 2 things you can do in life, but you can't do them at the same time. You can wring your hands, you can roll up your sleeves, but you can't do both. I dare anybody in this room to try. And you have those people that come up wringing their hands. I don't have this. We got this deadline next week. It's like, okay, you're wringing your hands, or we're going to roll up our sleeves and get this done. And without those people in the team that I really needed and counted on and relied on, it's not a hand-wringing moment. We got to roll up our sleeves and get things done. That's how we're going to do it. So I lay that story out in terms of you have to develop those around you. That cohesion, everything. Even when you have that level of turbulence, you have to develop those things. So I'll stop there, go to my next slide, will be it. I know James told me that I could talk as long as I wanted to, and that got me here. And when I showed up, I said, how long do I have to talk? He said, you got 30 minutes to talk as long as you want to talk. So I'm trying to be at the 30-minute mark. But my point with this one, this is especially for you guys, my penguin looks a little bit sad. He's really, really not sad. But just to show leadership is not black and white like we think about it. But the fun of really digging into and understanding and communicating constantly about leadership, which is why I do the napkins, but I do a lot of other things we all do when it comes to leadership, because you really want good people leading large organizations. You want good people doing the right things for the organization. And especially in the business of what we do with those precious resources that we have, sons and daughters, that's where we're spending a lot of our time. We spend a lot of time in that leader development component of it. Warfighting, we'll get that. A lot of those things we learn in our sleep, we can figure that out, right? But it's about the people at the end of the day, being able to save those lives, because we can't go into work and have a bad day. It happens. I've seen it happen with my own eyes. But you don't want to have a bad day when you're leading people. And you want to make sure you're the best leader possible for that organization. But I would think the same thing would be true in this room. So one, I'm very appreciative of the time. As I said earlier, I don't want to collect any money after this. So I'm very appreciative. Keep your dollars to yourself. It'll be fine for me. And James, I'm open for questions.
You mentioned that you do social media. So do you have to get permission from the Army in order for them to review what you actually putting out there?
No. We have teams. I mean, at this level, we have our public affairs teams, and they can do our social media. And a lot of the young kids ask me, like, who does your social media? I'm like, I do. Like this dude does it. Because people know it's you. And I had a rule, back in that same time, as a battalion commander, our division commander, a 2-star level commander, walks in a room one day to all the battalion commanders, and there's probably 7 of us, and he said, by Monday morning, I want all of you guys to have social media. And back then, we only had Facebook, right? So don't judge me. Back then, it was like 2008, 10 timeframe. Facebook was a big thing. MySpace, I think, was the other. He said, I want all of you to have Facebook. In the Army, you can't do that. You can't really direct people to do that, but he had 2 stars. We had like a little bit of rank. And we all looked at each other and we were like, hey, can the boss do that? It was like, no. But we get ratings, right? We get rated by the boss. 2 levels up, you get rated. And so one of my counterparts looked at me and said, so what are you going to do? I said, that's my senior rater, man. So I'm like, Monday morning, I'm going to have Facebook, right? And we all did. But at that point in time, I said, I really don't want to do it, but I got to have my own rules. What are my left and right limits? My left and right limits, what I use today, personal, professional, never political, and always positive. That's just kind of my box. I stay in that box, all things are okay. There's a lot of negativity on social media. People will come out, they do it, all the time with me, but the team that now I follow, that follows me, it's all positive. It's very hard to bring somebody down from that altitude, which is I'm not going to go in that altitude. Once you go in that space, you're in a bad spot, because we're not going to talk this out over social media with everybody else. And I mean, I've had those things. It's just like slip away. It just doesn't work, and it doesn't help other people that are looking, in some cases for motivation, for a little pick-me-up. I mean, which is why I share those things, and it doesn't take me a lot of time. It really doesn't take me a lot of time to do it throughout the day. I mean, I tell leaders that want to get their arms around it, I said maybe an hour a day, but you look at the amount of time I spend either in the air, in a vehicle, going from point A to point B, 5-10 minutes here or there may add up to an hour at the end of the day, but I'm not just constantly on social media, right? I mean, that takes me all of a few minutes to get it, post it, put it up, done. And then I've got my day job. I still have my day job, but it's not something that consumes me, but you got to leverage that as a component of influence. And even in our own definition, I mean, information space, that is the space you have to own, because it's your space. Whether you want to be there or not, you're in that space. Just go Google yourself. Just go Google yourself, right? See what pops up. You'll be amazed. You're in that space whether you want to be or not. And people will know. And so in this sense, I always try to own that space because it's mine. I have plenty of imposters. I get about 12 to 14 imposters a week, and they do bad stuff. They do very nefarious stuff. I've had people in the living room with me and my wife call my wife on our personal cell phone, because people can get to you. Like I said, go Google yourself. Call my wife, we're sitting there watching TV, and she's talking to somebody. I'm like, who are you talking to? A lady that says she's married to you. And she's like, no, I'm married to him, and he's actually sitting right beside me. No, he's coming to see me and my mother. Like 2 weeks from now, he just told me whatever, and it was like, okay. But now we kind of know. But I mean, the fact that this person got to my wife's personal cell phone number, I mean, so people can get to you. I mean, the things they do now in the information space is really, really scary. which is why we have a cyber command and do all things, regarding cyber just to protect ourselves. But I mean, I would say, take a look at that. I'm a long way from social media, but you at least have to know where you are in that space and what you do to protect yourself in that space, whether you want to be there or not. But again, it's been of good benefit to me, and it helps solve a lot of problems too, because people will come, to you, anonymous, doesn't really matter. I get that all the time, but that's within my organization. It's my problem, right? Because again, I'm responsible for everything that organization does or fail to do, and people will send it to you. As long as they know you're going to do something, they'll send it to you all day.
Quick question. You mentioned that you had a guidance counselor, someone early in life said, hey, you're not college material or whatever. But you also had people that influenced you. But if you made your personal Mount Rushmore, who would be on the side of that mountain and why?
I would put both of my I know it's got 4 people on Rushmore, but I have to put my grandparents. I mean, I was very fortunate to grow up with both sets of grandparents up until my 30s, great-grandparents. My great-grandfather fought in World War I. He was actually enlisted at Fort Jackson or Camp Jackson back then in a segregated army. So when he came in the Army, he couldn't do what I'm doing now. I've led combat formations. I've become an officer. He couldn't do that back in 1918. And I knew him. He passed away at the age of 95. I was about 15. So I spent plenty of time with my great-grandfather. And to go back there, literally 100 years to the date that he arrived at Fort Jackson. He arrived there in 1918. I showed up to command there in 2018. And people said, that is ironic. I said, no, that's not ironic. That is progress. But he never really talked about his World War I, time. But I would put them there. I have one awesome mentor that I met when I was a captain, who's still my mentor to this day. Again, we all need a coach, right? And one thing I learned about having that mentorship relationship, a mentor will tell you all the things you don't want to hear. That's what they will tell you. If you have somebody and they're telling you what you want to hear, not a good mentor. Because those decisions, things that I've made, not really me, questions I've asked, decisions he's helped me make, got me to this point. And I remember plenty of times I've come back from Iraq, ready to go back to Iraq, and he calls me and he says, you need to go to the Pentagon and be on the Joint Staff. And I'm like, sure, I don't want to go to the Pentagon, I don't want to go to the Joint Staff. You need to go to the Joint Staff. Sir, I don't want to go. Junior, I'm going to tell you one more time. You need to go to the Joint Staff. So this badge over here is like Joint Staff. So I've been to the Pentagon and on the Joint Staff and the Army staff. Best advice ever, but it was something I did not want to do. But that's what a good mentor is going to do. They're going to tell you what you don't want to hear. Because otherwise, you're just shopping around. And that's what people will typically do. I got a coach, I got a mentor, but you're going to shop around to like, I'm going to get the answer I want to hear. It's like, no, I didn't want to hear that. Nope, I didn't want to. Oh, what do you think I should do? I think you should, that's what I'm going to do. Okay. You're just shopping for answers. Don't shop around for what you want to hear. And I would have, of course, my parents, I think work ethic, I grew up, my dad was a truck driver. My mom was a factory worker up in the mill plants. Up in the upstate, we had Inman Mills all up there, and most of the family did all of that. So that's who I would have on there. And honestly, I think I would put that counselor on there, because she truly did. She totally motivated me. It's like you just turned a switch on that is never going to get turned off, because you told me what I can't do. It's like, all good.
Other questions? Any other questions?
They're all stunned and amazed. It's like, awesome.
We are at an economic development summit, and the forts that you command are important to the economies. What do the communities need to do to support the forts and the military men and women that are there?
Yeah, so I'm constantly in community, especially having commanded 3 installations. I tell people the Army will, not have me command something else once I can prove I can get command right, in three posts. But many installations, the thing that they don't know is just understand what that installation does and what it's about, right? Because there's always an economic impact. I think at Fort Jackson, the economic impact, to the areas like in the billions, like 4.4 billion. Where I am now in Kansas, like $2.2 billion economic impact for the area. But you have to understand, you have to put yourself in a position to advocate, because a lot of things I can't advocate for directly, and especially when you're dealing with, local leaders, when you're dealing with leaders that are inside the Beltway, And I've talked to a lot of senators and congressmen from all of those states. I mean, Senator Graham, Tim Scott, when I was in South Carolina, you think about the senators up in New York, I mean, you're always interacting, dialoguing with them, but I can't really ask for anything. And so that's where the community really comes in. Here's what's needed, because I can communicate with the community. Like Carl Blackstone knows, I can communicate and say, we need this, we need whatever, but I'm not asking. But Carl can go ask. He can go make a point of here's what's needed. Very similar out in Leavenworth. I know all the senators, know them very well, talk to them all the time, but I'm not asking. I can inform them, and I think everybody in that community just needs to understand, what that installation is about, and just the level of empathy. I mean, never give a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guardman sympathy. We don't really need sympathy. We volunteer, raise our hand to do what we need to do. But understanding of what we do is a lot different. Just understanding that fact alone. So when it comes to schools, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, think about those families that have moved constantly around. There's no consistency in terms of what they do. I may go from one area to the Midwest, and the hospital systems are like not like they were on the East Coast. But that's what I communicate to the people in the Midwest. It's like, understand, our healthcare networks are not that robust. So everything that we do, we have to do as a team, because that family still has those same needs regardless of where they go. And, oh, by the way, we don't want to be a burden on the community. So we've got to work together to where you've got this large installation in your community. It's not designed to be a burden. That's how they're all designed in the first place. But we got to work together and just understand the needs of that population there. So I spend plenty of times, just like in Columbia, with the chambers, with the mayors, sheriffs, superintendents. That's my other team that we're all nested. We have to be to understand and identify and meet needs across the board. But just those simple points, I would say, is like a great start.